we have an esteemed panel where we'll discuss basically this aspect. I'll give you a very quick introduction of my co-panelists, and then we'll go to the topic. So on my right is Jagdananda ji. I think many of you perhaps would know him because he is a real veteran in the development sector. So he is he's the co-founder of Center for Youth and Social Development. And besides that, he's also a member of the Standing Committee of Niti Ayog on partnerships between civil society and the government. And I think CSRBOX has very aptly kept him on this panel. To my left is Neelima De Silva Dalvi. She is Deputy Vice President of Mahindra Finance. So I think we'll get a good perspective of the corporate sector into, how do they align the community aspirations into their programs. And then we have Joydeep Sen. Again, he currently works with PwC, but I think, and as I just understood from him, he's also spent a lot of time in the development sector. But he's currently an Associate Director of Assurance at PwC, and he also leads their CSR in India and Bangladesh. I think it will be very pertinent for me to start with you, Jagdananda ji, because I think we can learn a lot from you, from your experience. And actually, you have been working with Niti Ayog and advising them on policy related to or related to partnerships between different stakeholders. And another, I actually wish to add another aspect to that also. I'm sure there'll be a lot of NGOs here in this room, which is pretty empty as of now, but I'm sure more people will join us in due course. So, two things which I would really want you to share with us. One, of course, is that, what has been your experience of working with communities, and you've worked with tribal communities largely in Orissa, of working with the communities wherein you have seen some very good examples, illustrations of the partnerships, government, corporate, NGOs, civil society. Please do also mention of the role of panchayats that they play, while these priorities are decided and while these projects are implemented.
Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a difficult session, right? The lunch was quite good. And if it's a good lunch, it's difficult for all of us, including the panelists. Partnership with the government and corporates. What does it mean on the ground zero? I have seen, without partnership with the government, the program in the long term, or in the short run, or in the longer term, is not going to be sustainable. And at this point of time, if we look at the resources of the government, during last 5 years, I was looking at the union budget now, 26 lakh crore to 45 lakhs over a period of last 4 years, which is a very big quantum jump actually. I come from Odisha. The Odisha budget was 1.25 lakh. It has now become 2.30 lakh. Almost touching more than 85% increase actually. And the kind of social sector investment which government is doing now in the rural development sector, through the National Rural Livelihood Mission, the Panchayat Sashaktikaran Abhiyan, it's a phenomenal resource which is going actually. From 23%, almost the increase is more than 35% in the social sector. So where is this resource going, and how do we reclaim this resource, which is meant for the rural people, which is meant for the rural development, which is meant for, people's development in the, rural and tribal hinterland. As I have seen now, and on top of it, there are 15th Finance Commission awards also flowing, right? The last 15th Finance Commission award was to the tune of 1,60,153 crore, which was meant for disaster response fund and mitigation fund. And Odisha share I was looking at was something like almost 9,000 crores actually. So these are all very substantive resources. The point I want to drive is, when such substantive resources are flowing, how do you really leverage these resources on the ground? So from my experience, I have seen we have worked very closely with the government. Of course, working with the government, partnership with the government can be a source of life or a kiss to death. It can be also a kiss to death. Second installment will never come. There are issues. There is no, grievance redressal mechanism. And there are, I don't want to get into that. All of you who have experienced government funding, you have gone through that. But the beauty of the story is, if the agreement is very clear, and, CSR, what we do, the model we adopt is, we approach a funder, the funder gives us money for our core operations, and then with the assurance that we will leverage the resources of the government so that the money which is due by the small and marginal farmer or a tribal women-headed household will go directly from the government, and will ensure that this leveraging is done actually. And by doing it, I tell you, every rupee we have spent on the operation, we have leveraged not less than 200 rupees. That is the kind of power of government leveraging. But, I think the story there is, you see, government is not just Delhi. Government is just not our state capitals. Government is also there at the local government. The panchayats there, right? And panchayats are nowhere inferior, nor the Delhi is superior actually. It's one tier of government, the second tier and third tier, right? So, in my organization, what we have done, we have signed clear MOUs with the panchayats actually. There are about more than 250 memorandum of understandings signed between the panchayat system and organization, very clearly delineating how panchayats will work, what is the kind of resources they will leverage, what we will do, how do we work together in strengthening, the panchayat raj system. And to my, surprise, recently, I was very happy to see that the Government of India's current development framework, along with between Rural Development Ministry and the Panchayat Raj Ministry, is twofold. One is to align our 2030 Sustainable Development Goals agenda or Agenda 2030. What they have done, now they have clearly delineated how do we localize sustainable development goals at the panchayat level. I think that is very important. And I would really encourage each one of you who are present here and your other friends, your extended family members, to look at this wireframe, the framework which has been developed by Government of India in localizing sustainable development goals. What they are talking, if Agenda 2030 has to be realized, if leaving no one behind has to be realized, then we have to think of a panchayat which is poverty-free with enhanced livelihood. There is a complete wireframe around that. Healthy panchayat, healthy village, child-friendly village, water-sufficient village, clean and green village, socially secured village, engendered development in the village, and so on and so forth. There are 9 parameters they have done. And in these parameters, each parameter is a very powerful parameter, and panchayats are expected to come out with a clear plan so that they can do something on their own, out of their own resources if they have. If they do not have resources, they can reach a local NGO, leverage their resources, and together they can leverage the resources of state government, national government, and wherever it is possible, CSR. And to do that, I think a substantive work has to be done between the NGOs and the panchayat to develop this plan in a very comprehensive, in a robust way, in a powerful way, in a participatory way actually. Once that plan is in place, then getting funding becomes a gateway that you can leverage the resources. And I have seen there, because the Government of India is talking now in that approach, a whole society approach. In a whole society approach, a whole ecology approach, and a whole government approach, in which they have anticipated in the policy itself that NGOs, community-based organizations like self-help groups, farmer-producer organizations, they also come forward, and at the same time, government, through a whole government approach also, is able to work with them. That means all other departments related with those developments in the panchayat have to also come, pulling their sleeves out from their departmental silos actually. Since there is a call for convergence, then since there is a call for leveraging actually, so therefore I consider these are all very good moments actually. How do you really activate this convergence? How do you leverage this convergence? I think once that happens, and if sustainable development goals is realized on the ground at a panchayat level, that's the only way we can accomplish 2030 agenda.
I think
Thank you.
That's a very interesting point, sir, that you have made. In fact, I'll come back to you on that again. But, this is now my attempt to wake some of us up. So a quick kind of a survey, Jagdananda ji mentioned of the increased allocations into rural development, and you talked about a real substantial amount that has been now allocated. How many of us here think that increased allocation would necessarily mean a better impact or an increased impact? We can raise our hands. None? That's pretty surprising, sir. Can I have your quick thought on this?
No, I think, when the budget size goes up, it doesn't mean that the budget reaches the people actually. If the program is not well formulated, if the priorities of the people are not encompassed, if the dreams, aspirations, hopes, priorities of the people are not, captured in the plan itself, it will never become a reality actually. Today that is the problem. And that is where you and me, along with the government, or you and me who have to wake up the government to work together to activate the panchayat system actually. Once the panchayat system starts playing its role like an autonomous, real local government, please remember these words, then only system is likely to get activated. And the other problem for which there is such a low response is government program is all hardware actually. Government program is all infrastructure. And infrastructure, you can spend money, you can get money also. Right? What you cannot do, what is difficult to do is software actually. Mobilizing people, organizing people, building the capacities of community-based organizations. And that is our forte actually. And the partnership between government and civil societies, how do we bring the software and the hardware together so that we can leverage the development handles? That's all I will say.
Thank you so much, sir. In fact, Neelima, I intended to come to you because I think, but I'll go first to Joydeep because Joydeep, you've worked largely in that space. So you saw that, what is the thought of the audience here in terms of the impacts linked to the increased allocations. Do you think the corporates somehow can play a role in helping people get a better access to these resources? I mean, is there a way, and could that also mean that the utilization also becomes more efficient?
Thank you, Vishal. I think Jagdananda sir has already mentioned, and with the audience when we discussed, one of the things which you clearly highlighted that increasing the fund doesn't mean that the efficiency will increase. And I'll just give you an example, and I come from public health background, so I'll tell you that if you look into the public health budgets, a lot of public health budget is unutilized. People talk about the government has reduced the health budget, but actually that's not the scenario. If you go to the state level PIPs, you'll see that the fund has not been utilized. Over and over a period of time, if you don't utilize that fund, none of your donors will give you that money. So the efficiency becomes very, very important. But more than efficiency is that how you develop those programs like what Jagdananda ji has said. Infrastructure is a very important component to it. The softer part is community mobilization. Third is capacity building. Fourth is actually whether we know where we want to implement and whether we are able to do a proper need assessment of the program. I'll come to the CSR bit of it, but the larger thing is that Government of India currently and going into an election year, there are three important schemes which government are focusing on. One is Jal Shakti Mission, the other is financial inclusion, and third is the Ujjwala. Now, these are the most important drivers if you look into how India will change in terms of the social norms and social changes which will bring. And everything will draw into the other part of around livelihood, sustainable livelihood, access to health services and everything else. Now, when we work with Niti Aayog, and they talk a lot about the aspirational districts. And aspirational district, which we used to again earlier call like the lacquered districts, but like all of us know why we call it aspiration. Now, if we have an aspiration to reach to a certain standard, and if we have to achieve those SDG goals, what is important is to improve those efficiency. And here, and I keep on telling that CSR and NGOs are partners, not a donor and implementer relationship. CSR companies will bring a lot of efficiency because they work in a structured way. And a lot of organizations who work with corporates, there is a frustration that the corporates keep on asking documents, they keep on asking you to report, they will keep on asking you about different things. That's something which we need to look at from a positive way. And for the corporates, they have to also look that the subject matter expertise come from the implementing organization. And how do we marry it to bring that result becomes much more important. One of the things when you work with corporates, you keep on hearing about SROI, which we earlier used to call as cost benefit analysis. And like if you talk about SROI, what Jagdananda sir has mentioned is that when you work, a corporate has given you, let's say, 1 crore to invest. And there is so much of money which is lying in the government kitty, which government asks corporates that you work on those aspiration districts, you identify a right partner, you achieve the goals which have been set to be achieved on the district. And all of us know that the district magistrate is accountable now to the Niti Aayog. And one of their important KPIs is how they are able to improve access to the government schemes. So there the corporates and NGOs can work together, tap into those resources, and then improve that efficiency. So that is very, very important. Another important point and factor which I want to draw here, and if you look into the current funding scenario in India, a lot of NGOs, their FCRA licenses are not getting renewed. You may like to see it in one way that, okay, we will not get the international funding coming in. The other way is to look into that whether we as an Indian entity, how we are able to leverage into so much of funding which is there, billions and billions of dollars, which is there in the government funding, and tap into that resources and increase our delivery mechanism. So these are the things which we need to keep in mind. But what is important is that how we structurally develop our program and how do we measure it, and then how we partner with the right organization becomes a very, very critical factor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joydeep. And now I'll come to you, Neelima. Neelima, as you know, works with Mahindra Finance, and she leads the CSR ESG function there. When I was kind of researching for my co-panelists, I realized that, you know, one of the greater things that they're doing besides, of course, working on financial literacy, livelihood, and health and education, you know, the thing that caught my attention was their preference to work in the low serviced regions, right, in terms of the financial investments. Do you think, Neelima, that this priority of yours actually helps the communities to strengthen their social, economic resilience? I mean, does it really help practically when you work on ground with these people?
Yeah, thank you, Vishalji. Am I audible there, right at the end? Okay, thank you. So yes, I do believe that, rural development is important, but at the same time, we also have to talk about the urban poverty and the semi-urban poverty. Because a lot of focus is also going for rural development, these areas are neglected. And hence, as a corporate, we also have to step up to do investments in these areas. talking about the resilience, it just reminds me of a story. So I don't intend to put you to sleep by this story, but just help awake those who are sleeping. So the story goes like this. There was a wise man, and people were coming from far and wide to seek his wisdom. One of his disciples, one day, he approached Guruji to seek his wisdom and to seek some inspiration and motivation. So while walking, the Guruji just told the disciple that just accompany in a walk nearby a bamboo forest. So while they were taking that stroll in that towering bamboo stalks, the disciple observed something, a very unique structure of bamboo. And it seemed to him that the bamboos had different segments and they were separated by joints. I'm sure you would also have observed the bamboo, right? So he was very curious and he couldn't help but ask the Guruji about this unique structure of bamboo. Guruji simply paused and he allowed the sounds of the nature to fill the silence. And after some time, he just tells his disciple that, my son, you're right. The bamboo has a very, very unique structure. Although it looks maybe very slender or very delicate, but it has a lot of resilience. And the secret lies in its joints. When the storm hits, the bamboo doesn't break. It just bends, it sways, and then it just waits for that storm to get settled. And another secret of bamboo is its roots, its deep entrenched roots, which just helps it to gain that strength despite of all the adversaries of the nature. The Shishya, the disciple, was very amazed. And he said, yes, this really resonates with the journey of our life. There's so much of strength in that bamboo, which helps that resilience in spite of different storms and stresses that cause in life. So Vishalji, you asked me about the resilience. So what is resilience? So resilience is nothing but your ability to bounce back. And I just want to focus on one thing, that while we are working on the theme of rural development, what are those roots? The roots, like the roots of the bamboo. Our roots are the roots of our culture, our traditions, our values. While working on the rural development as a theme, we have to nurture those values. We have to build on the community participation. For example, if you are working on water resource development, yes, we have developed the resources, we have handed over it to the community. But are we talking about the equity there? Are we talking about water management there? Are we ensuring that the people who are at the head of the structure or who are at the tail of the structure, are they getting equal or enough water or not? Correct? So once we build those values and those kind of approaches, it helps in building the resilience. The other part of the bamboo is the joints, which holds the segments together. We working in any geographic region, I have seen that in one village there are at least 2 to 3 different NGOs working. One is working on health, the other working is on education, कोई financial literacy पे काम करता है, कोई financial inclusion पे काम करता है, कोई sports पे काम करता है. Let us be those joints who gives that strength and resilience to the community instead of just competing amongst each other. The other important thing we need to focus is on the accepting or working towards building the capacities of our communities for climate risk adaptations, which is so very important because we are all facing those challenges already, and in future we are going to face it in a very bad way. The other important thing is we also need to work on the biodiversity issues. And last but not the least, building the institutional capacities. Sir just spoke about working with the panchayat, working with all the community institutions, which are our foundation, be it an SHG, be it an FPO, be it any other community-based organization or institution. As corporates, we need to invest in building the capacities of these organizations. Only then we will be able to sustain what we are doing, and we will be able to build the resilience of our organizations. And last but not the least, we have to ensure that there is enough funding for all the things that we want to do so that we support the aspirations of our communities.
Yeah, I think that's a great thought, and that's a great way of actually explaining your priorities. But I have a slightly tougher question for you now, Neelima. You've spoken about your priorities, your organization's priorities. Now I'll come back to the topic that we have been assigned to discuss. Of course, environment will be your priority, climate change will be your priority, health, education, all of these will be your priorities. How do you ensure that this is aligned to the community's aspirations? I'll tell you why I'm asking you this. Most of us in the corporate sector work across geographies, right? And then when we go out to work in these geographies, usually we go out with a single agenda, right? We have 3 priorities and we go out anywhere and we say, we'll work on these three priorities. How do we match those with the local aspirations? That's my point. And once you have answered, then I'll go to, there's somebody who raised his hand for a question, and I'll go there. Yeah.
So Vishalji, I think, to align the aspirations, we need to understand the pulse of the community. We have to understand what are their needs. So instead of going with your 3 agendas, first let us understand what is the need of the community and what are their aspirations. And then can we build some bridge between our aspirations and the community aspirations. I'll just give you an example of Mahindra Finance's Swabhiman program. When we were doing the needs assessment, we worked with the drivers community. So while doing the needs assessment, we checked with our driver brothers and sisters. And we asked them that, what are your major concerns and what would you want us to focus? So many of our drivers told us that, we are drivers, but we don't want our children to be drivers. So please do something for our children that will enable them to do something better in life. Because driving as a profession is looked, ki kuch nahi mila to driver ban gaya. Correct? So that helped us to design our scholarship program. So we are providing scholarships to the children of drivers right from the first grade till the post-graduation. The second thing came about many of the drivers who have become now drivers. You will agree with me that most of them have not gone through the formal education. Aaj cleaner tha, kal driver ban gaya. So many of them are not aware about the traffic rules or the maintenance or defensive driving. And then they said that, hamara kuch upskilling karao. And that is how we designed our program. So just to cut the long story short, we have to design our programs by taking consideration of the community, and that is how we can align their aspirations with our aspirations.
No, that's so good to know. I think you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to supplement one point. Sometimes, we are in a beautiful country, and I say we are a country and full of rhetorics actually. There is a big difference between the reality on the ground and the rhetoric at the supra level or the macro level. Who can handle the, deal with the reality, people who are here, right? We are champions. But if you don't use the lever at the right time, in the right way, and in the right manner, then, we miss the boat. So one of the points I want to just share with you, 19 lakh gram panchayats in this country, 19 lakh plus gram panchayats. On a National Panchayati Raj Day, 24th April 22, last year, they took a oath by design, by default, by a policy of the government, that there will be a People's Plan campaign which will be rolled out in this country. People's Plan, where people's priorities, their problems, their issues, their pains, their frustrations, all is articulated, and, that is converted to a village development plan. And village development plan is converted to a Gram Panchayat development plan, which we call GPDP. And then, in the Gram Panchayat development plan, there is a village poverty reduction plan ingrained over a period of 5 years. How are we going to identify those who are below poverty line, identify those who are vulnerable, identify those who are disadvantaged, who are out of the social security, who are out of this provision, that provision, and they are really struggling for a decent survival. If we identify them and put them as a village poverty reduction plan, and then work over a period of 5 years, then things are bound to change. Let us say, let me just check in this group, how many of us are aware about a good village level poverty reduction plan in any of your panchayats? If you have seen that, if you have worked on that, you have done that. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Now the question is, this is a framework which has been rolled out. Niti Aayog has endorsed it. Rural Development Department has said we will work in tandem with the Ministry of Panchayati Raj on this. State governments were invited. They were given this mandate. State plan of action, state framework of action is designed. Panchayat level changes have to be designed, and they have done it, like making a village and a panchayat disaster risk reduction, strategy. In Odisha, where I come from, they had to change the panchayat law actually. It was amended by an ordinance. And then when you really look at it, when I ask my civil society friends, when I ask even panchayats, when I ask corporates who are very much involved through their foundations, when I ask even district level officials, half of them will know, half of them will have no clue about it. I think the point I want to drive is, if village development plan has to be developed, that investment calls for a different level of energy actually. That calls for different level of involvement. That calls for a stronger collaboration actually. Government will say, 2 घंटे में plan बन जाएगा. 2 घंटे में नहीं होता है plan. It will take minimum 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes minimum 1 to 2 months, minimum over a period of 6 months, the plan can be finalized, developed actually, in which consultation with everyone in the village is done appropriately actually. That is a very long-term process. So are we ready actually for that process? Are we ready to develop a poverty reduction plan in a village and convert it to a panchayat development plan? I think these are all questions we need to ask ourselves, and we have to collectively also find answers to how to get these things done in a manner so that our funders, our donors, our partners, our collaborators, they appreciate the complexity of working around these processes. Thank you.
So now, as we said, we'll take a question in the middle of the session also from you. Can somebody lend the mic to?
Thank you, sir. Actually, I would like to extend my welcome because I am seeing 2 of the prominent social workers in the panel. And I would like to just frame the question in such a way that most of the organizations are working for social empowerment, be it an implementing agency or be it a CSR funding agency. But when we talk about social environment, the social settings of India, this happens to be an experiential learning that I've gone through while in TIS Tuljapur. Most of the agencies are not addressing social evils. along with social empowerment. And another anecdote was that late Dr. S. Parshuraman, he just handhold a person who was a gardener in our campus. And today he is the most resourceful person for us to conduct field works across livelihood missions of India, across all the NGOs of India. That's the level of potential a social worker can have and impact can have. But when it comes to placements, many of the agencies were asked by the students that what are you doing in terms of addressing the marginal needs of a society. So many of the organizations couldn't answer it because they clearly said we are not dealing with social evils. But when a development plan is designed, let's just say if a tap water is to be placed in a village, it will be first placed in the center of the village. But the question from the student's perspective will be how many people have access to the center of the village. So to keep the question again short, that how is the approach changing, or is there a change that you observe, any of the members observe in this case? Yeah, thank you.
Joydeep, would you want to?
That's a really good question. Like now, when you talk about social evils, it's primarily what we are talking about, whether the marginalized are getting priority, whether their voices are being heard, whether they have are able to participate when the program is being designed, right? If I am not wrong. So if you, like when we talk about sustainable livelihood, most people in this, all of us may understand livelihood just from an income perspective. But livelihood, when we talk about the root cause of livelihood, it starts with vulnerability. And when we talk about vulnerability, we talk about obviously the social causes, root causes, societal norms, and access. So when we have an access to resources, obviously we'll have access to knowledge, you will get training, you will get capacity building, you will have an access to income, and then overall your life and your livelihood will change. Now, when you work with organizations who are deeply rooted and working with the communities, they will always start with participatory planning, which was the core of how you do a rural development. When we studied in college and obviously in TES and other colleges, we used to do something called a PRA, Participatory Rural Appraisal, where we used to go to the field, we used to involve the communities at different places. And what you rightly said, that if you go to any kind of villages, except maybe the tribal village, you will see Dalits at the periphery and the upper caste at the center of it. How you design that program, where you bring all the stakeholders to design that implementation plan, becomes the core to improve that access. That's the first part, when you do a need assessment of it. The second important part is that where are the resources available? One is the physical resource which is available within the community, within your area. And second is in terms of the access to resource, financial resource, or access to government schemes. And more you involve them, more you give them that knowledge, they will be empowered to do that. Third important part, what Neelima was mentioning, that, and I'll give you an example in Gujarat, when we used to work on participatory irrigation management, like Steve was mentioning, that there were farmers who are on the head, and then the farmers who are on the tail. Tail end farmers are generally small and marginal or landless who are there, and they do not have an access to it. So when you design that scheme, when we used to design a participatory irrigation management program, we used to involve everybody. Because ultimately, if those at the bottom, if they don't get, they will be unhappy, and they will create problem who are at the beginning. So the core thing which I want to bring is that you involve everybody, give them that access to knowledge, power and resources, and then the things will evolve over a period of time. I believe, as somebody who has implemented program and somebody who is on the CSR, societal norms will change over a period of time. It changes not just on a value based, it changes when you give them access to knowledge, give them access to resources, it gives them power to you give them power to their voice to do that. So I think that would answer your question. But one last point, like when you go to a corporate, they may not say that we are working toward the societal evil. As somebody who understands it, you need to bring it back to them and say that, okay, if we are working with, let's say with farmers, or you are working on skilling, then obviously you are trying to address those issues. And if I am as a development professional, I would be joining your organization, these are the changes I will bring. So you have to be the driver to bring that change. CSR will always be, CSR is evolving, it's a mechanism. But if you bring that knowledge there, CSR will be much more enriched in that sense.
Thank you so much, Joydeep. In fact, you so rightly mentioned of this village development plan, sir. And as I sit back and as I listen to you and as I think of my own experience, on the side of the corporate, village development plans, I don't know why we have ignored that all of this time. While deciding our priorities, the corporates would be happy to invest money in doing their own independent impact or needs assessment studies, wherein they'll spend lakhs of rupees in getting those studies done. But we have never tried to look at the village development plans which already exist. And I think each district, if I am correct, they have their own planning departments, who develop the annual development plans for the districts, wherein one can find the priorities of those districts. I think the board also parallelly creates their own annual financial development plans. So I think high time for the corporates to start looking at these documents which are available, readily available, and then that's perhaps the best way to integrate the aspirations of the communities who are the important stakeholders into our own CSR priorities. Somebody was wanting to ask a question there.
Hello.
Can we go in first and then we'll come to you?
Sir, I am Dr. Saurabh Kole from Advanced Healthcare Foundation. Actually, I am an emergency medicine physician and critical care physician. I have been working in the disaster management since 2001, from Gujarat earthquake, Nagapattinam tsunami, Myanmar cyclone, Bangladesh cyclone, Nepal earthquake. Everywhere I have worked. When I have started working in this field, it was whenever I was going to give a lecture, initially we divided the man-made disaster, natural disaster. So gradually, when the times are coming, whenever we are seeing the disasters, that is the realizations that the man-made disasters are much more, many a time are responsible for the natural disasters also. So now 80% of the disaster, we can say it is a man-made, and the 20% may be the natural disaster, if we think that the man-made disaster was turned out to be natural disaster. So in that case, disaster preparedness, it was not known to me earlier, but after working for a long time, I have realized that disaster preparedness is a science and it should be known to everybody. But it's very difficult to implement others, very difficult to implement and to talk to the others also. So in the school level also probably the disaster preparedness should be a...
So we'll have to keep it brief because there are other people.
Yes, so if we want to work, how can we work regarding disaster preparedness? It's a science definitely, but how can we work?
Right, thank you so much, sir.
Myself, Ranjit from Amrita. So I just want to add on to what you said because the whole topic was on aligning with the community aspiration and governance system, because I was hearing the lectures all throughout the two days where people discussing more about how to align the NGOs with regard to the CSR, the company, the corporate structure and the compliance and etc. But just to make sure from my experience of working with the government, village development plan and incorporating the development through that way, one thing everyone should be aware is that there is another level of compliance which you have to do with the government. So to manage the corporate governance and the government governance is very critical, and to cross that barrier, the important thing is to build resilience to the communities, because that is a very important factor everyone should be aware, because we always think about the funders and the supporting people like government, the panchayat head or the people. We always go behind that. So in my experience of working with many NGOs across India, I have seen that people always focus on these two people, the funders and the people who implement. Always ignore the beneficiary, the villages actually. So what happens the moment we step out or the politics changes? Maybe before every 6 months or 9 months we have some elections coming up, the change is happening. So because who makes the change? The people makes the change. So it is very important we build the resilience of the people in terms of different development parameters, so that they are able to push for the agenda, whatever is the development agenda. So only that can enable. So I have experiences which, if you can later can come
thank
to
you.
me.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
making that very important point. I think we just left with 3 minutes, so I think somebody was in the queue before you. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll quickly.
Yeah, please.
I won't
Go
take long. So I work in the trafficking sector. I work in International Justice Mission. We work in preventing and combating human trafficking, and we work with a massive migrant population across states. One challenge we face is that there is no coordination between state governments. There is an unspoken sense of competition. And do you think, ma'am and sirs, from your experience, that replicating a model, we've had some successful projects, can that be seen as an investment if we partner with the CSR across states? Because there is a sense of pride in rural development and community aspirations, but there is migration because there is no rural development taking place in a lot of villages. So that's my question.
So with this guy telling me there's just 2 minutes left, I'll not hand the mic over to anyone to respond, but we'll certainly continue with this discussion
Sure,
after our panel. But perhaps, we'll have one last comment from someone there.
Yeah. So this is a question with respect to the GPDP, the Gram Panchayat Development Plans and the Poverty Reduction Plans. One of the critical roles we've seen is to be played by the federations, CBOs in shaping that plan, right? Therefore, an investment on the ground in community-based organizations is something that really needs to happen. And it's not seen as, it's because it's not a clear deliverable, right? It's not seen as a priority for CSR, right? Likewise, top-down planning, the district planning, right? When you want to sort of make sure that these plans permeate up, if you're only working in a block, not the whole district, then it becomes a bit of a constraint, right? So how do you invest on the bottom and also simultaneously make sure it influences the district plans, right? And how do you ensure CLFs play a critical role from a CSR perspective?
Sure. So I think we'll also, you want to respond to that?
No, I think the investment in the community-based plans is critical at this point of time. If we are not doing, I think we need to invest there. And this is long term. This is the foundation actually. CSR has to come, civil society has to come in a big way. If we don't come now, I think we'll lose this opportunity which is available as a new window actually. That is one. Second, what is the work of the civil society? I always feel, we are supposed to bring innovative solutions to complex problems. The second is we ensure interaction between fragmented communities, and then we influence the system. If these three are very important areas of our work, I think this kind of investment is necessary. Community-based organizations, investment in them, software, soft skills, capacity building work at that end, which may not look very exciting for many entities, is a critical need if we want to really change the color of the rural development landscape in this country.
So thank you so much, and thank you for ending that observation and that note right at time when I see time's up there. Now that we are actually out of time, I'll not make any closing remarks here because I think we've already spoken about what we wanted to speak about. But I'll just thank my co-panelists. Thank you so much for the enlightenment. I think your experience, your remarks were very, very meaningful. Thank you so much, sir. With your body of work, I think we'll continue this conversation for many days, I think, after this, and we'll continue to learn from you. And thank you so much. Thank you for attending this session.